So the U.S. is totally overextended. They're totally using fiat money to fund it all. They're printing it by their trillions. They've got $36 trillion worth of debt. The economy is sinking under the interest on that debt, which is now over $1 trillion. It's the biggest line on the line item, bigger than the military defense line item. So they are literally shrinking down to nothing because they're killing themselves by printing all of this fiat money, and the inflation's starting to kick in for real. People are noticing that the purchasing power of their U.S. dollar is collapsing. And therefore, the opposite, of course, is Bitcoin, where the purchasing power is increasing. Just like everything goes to zero against Bitcoin, I think every other country is going to go to zero against El Salvador.
Keiser opens with a provocative statement: Bitcoin is not just reacting to the chaos of the current financial system. It is actively causing it. He suggests that countries deeply entrenched in fiat currency, particularly those funding unwinnable wars with printed money, are on a path of self-destruction. As these nations pour money into conflicts that cannot be sustained, Bitcoin, with its decentralized and deflationary nature, presents an alternative that is disrupting their grip on global power. Keiser touches on the broader geopolitical implications, noting that the US is already involved in multiple proxy wars: Russia, China, Taiwan, Israel, and Iran. These conflicts, Keiser argues, are funded by unsustainable levels of fiat money printing, with U.S. national debt exceeding $36 trillion. The interest on this debt has become the largest budgetary expense, surpassing even military defense spending. As inflation continues to erode the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar, Keiser contrasts this with Bitcoin, whose purchasing power is steadily increasing. Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space, and drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks and enjoy the video.
What's happening, in my view, is that Bitcoin is, I often ask the question on social media, is it reacting to the chaos or is it causing the chaos? I think in a large part it's causing the chaos. And a lot of countries are going to take themselves out of the game by getting into unwinnable wars funded by fiat money. Bitcoin, which is the currency here in El Salvador, it's unconfiscatable, and the country's stacking Bitcoin every day. They've got almost $500 million worth of Bitcoin, and they're stacking every single day. And so they have that beacon of appeal that you, as a Cuban who would escape communism and go to the U.S., you now have people in the U.S. You have 500,000 Salvadorans who fled the country who are now moving back to El Salvador. The diaspora are moving back to El Salvador. People in the U.S. who want a family experience for their family without some of the crazy social justice nonsense that you see in the U.S. are coming to El Salvador because they have strong family values. And you see the numbers at the border. You have reverse migration. Instead of Salvadorans going to the U.S., you have mostly people in the U.S. going to El Salvador. It's reverse migration. So it's coming here. So to your point about, well, can El Salvador withstand an attack, right? If the U.S. decides to attack countries, and of course the U.S. is already attacking countries, right? NATO is the U.S. and they're involved in a proxy war against Russia. You've got the U.S. is involved in a proxy war, China and Taiwan. The U.S. is involved in a proxy war between Israel and Iran, right? So the U.S. is totally overextended. They're totally using fiat money to fund it all. They're printing it by their trillions. They've got $36 trillion worth of debt. The economy is sinking under the interest on that debt, which is now over $1 trillion. It's the biggest line on the line item, bigger than the military defense line item. So they are literally shrinking down to nothing because they're killing themselves by printing all of this fiat money, and the inflation's starting to kick in for real. People are noticing that the purchasing power of their U.S. dollar is collapsing. And therefore, and the opposite, of course, is Bitcoin, where the purchasing power is increasing. So, yes, it seems stark, but as any good lambada dancer knows, you've got to get with the rhythm. You've got to hear the music. You've got to read the room. You've got to understand what it takes to get with the wave and be with one, with Satoshi, and have the faith that we're on the right side of history. Come here and experience the beautiful waves. Come here and experience the liberation, the freedom. Let your heart be your guide. Be guided by your passion. Be guided by your heart. Be guided by the beat. Just like everything goes to zero against Bitcoin, I think every other country is going to go to a zero against El Salvador in their own way, because we're entering into this 21st century paradigm where this of economics being based now on Bitcoin and Bitcoin as the base layer. As someone had said already, you have to have Bitcoin as the base layer to build upon, and then you're building something that's solid. Anything that's built on fiat money, of course, can crumble, and just like it's crumbling right now. And so here we have the first mover advantage, and we see the benefits happening every single day. And I think the next 5 years in the president's second term, you're going to see an acceleration of all the positive trends that we saw in the first 5 years. Those who really have had a free ride now for decades by controlling the communications are panicking. And they also are rolling into and heading into the buzzsaw of rising inflation. So the economy is shrinking, and the population's getting more and more strident, more and angrier, and hard to control. And what the Economist magazine euphemistically calls social unrest, which you and I would call rioting, is starting to nip at the heels of all the power centers. And talking to people in the business of communications, they still say that First Amendment is protected in the U.S. And the Congress in the U.S. and the Senate in the U.S., by and large, still supports free speech and still supports the First Amendment. But after this next election in November, that may not be the case. We may not have any more a beachhead in the West for free speech. The U.S. is on the verge of tipping over into full-fledged communism, or whatever you want to call it, but it won't be what we've known the U.S. to be famous for 240 years. So as I've talked to folks here and around the world, it's great to have a plan B and maybe a plan A.
Anthony Pompliano highlights the contrast between the stock market's limited hours and Bitcoin's constant availability, noting that geopolitical events or economic shifts often occur outside of traditional market hours. In such cases, investors in the stock market are left powerless, unable to adjust their portfolios until the market reopens. In contrast, Bitcoin's continuous trading ensures that individuals can always react to global events in real time. This, Pompliano asserts, is a key reason why Bitcoin is the only true free market global asset, responsive to world events and accessible to anyone, anywhere.
It's really interesting. Like, first of all, before anyone goes and says, oh no, the stock market's been trading for longer than since 1971, of course. But in the fiat era, as you pointed out, since 1971 and the Nixon shock, the stock market has only been open in terms of hours of operations during the week. I always like to point out that the stock market is actually closed more hours a week than it is open. So they got your money and you can't access it more than what they will allow. Those hours of operations prevent you. And so then if you go and you look at Bitcoin, it trades 24/7, 365. Now, one of the advantages is that there's stuff that happens geopolitically or in the economy all the time. Maybe it happens early in the morning. Maybe it happens late at night. Maybe it happens on the weekend. Bitcoin is always trading. And so you can always access your money. You can always buy or sell whenever you want to. But this idea of cumulative trading hours really is, well, how much is the robustness of the system? How much has the system been tested? And if you think about this idea of Bitcoin, although in terms of years as a measurement, it's actually younger than the fiat stock market, if you measure it by hours of operations in which it has been open, Bitcoin is older than the fiat stock market. And so what that tells you is that Bitcoin has been tested more than a fiat stock market, which would suggest that Bitcoin is more robust. It also would suggest that actually Bitcoin has more data points. And it also would suggest, because of the global accessibility, which the stock market does not have to the same degree of Bitcoin, that more people are able to use Bitcoin, more people are able to access it based on the measurement of time, and there is the ability to respond to anything that happens in the world at any time, any place. And so when you put those things together, Bitcoin is probably the only true free market global asset. And in a world where investors are becoming more and more kind of aware of these different global events, you need to have an asset that trades 24/7, 365, available to anyone, anywhere, and also is sensitive to these global events. And so if you look at the stock market, the US stock market may not actually move depending on what happens in the Philippines or in a South American country or maybe in a random country in Europe, right? Because the US stock market is focused on the United States. But Bitcoin moves based on a lot of these different global events. And so when all of a sudden we saw Iran shoot rockets at Israel, Bitcoin was very volatile. The stock market was closed. And so if you're an investor sitting at home and you're watching the news and you see that this geopolitical event is playing out, how do you express that in the financial markets? How do you protect yourself? Forget how do you make money. How do you protect your portfolio? The world changed and you can't change your portfolio. With Bitcoin, that's never a problem. You always have access to the market, and therefore Bitcoin is actually older in terms of time that you could trade it than the fiat stock market. I think that looking at the extreme tells you about kind of the everyday situation. And so, yes, of course, there are only a certain amount of traders or kind of sophisticated financial folks who are going to change their portfolio based on something that's happening somewhere else in the world. But the market should not determine who has access. The people should determine whether they want to trade or not. And so what ends up happening in the stock market is they prevent you from trading. If you are sophisticated or not, whether you want to trade or you don't have the ability more hours a week than when it is open. And so what Bitcoin does is it simply says, hey, we're open for business all the time. You can sit on your hands or you can act. It's up to you. We're offloading that responsibility to you to make decisions about your own portfolio. Whereas if you really think about the stock market, it's a gated market. It's only available to you when the big finance bosses say that you can trade. They're the gatekeepers. And so again, I understand why they do it, right? It used to be very human driven. People want to go home. They want to go to their families. They need to sleep, all these different things. But now we live in a world that should be more global, that should be more technology enabled. And so I do actually think that the stock market eventually will open up to 24/7, 365. A lot of people don't like to talk about this, but the US stock market has an immense amount of overnight trading. And if you look at the financial returns, the returns of stock movements overnight versus during the normal hours of operation, overnight returns have destroyed during the day returns.
Max Keiser's analysis paints a stark picture of the future, one where fiat currencies and traditional financial systems crumble under the weight of their own inefficiencies, while Bitcoin rises as the foundation of a new, decentralized economy. El Salvador's pioneering role in this transformation is just the beginning, as more nations will be forced to reckon with the power of Bitcoin. As Keiser emphasizes, the world is shifting, and those who fail to adapt will be left behind. For investors, understanding the importance of a 24/7 accessible global asset like Bitcoin is key to navigating the coming financial storm. In a world of chaos and uncertainty, Bitcoin offers a beacon of stability and freedom. And as Keiser so aptly puts it, you've got to get with the wave and be one with Satoshi. Please like and subscribe my channel.